Okay, councillors, let's begin. So welcome to members of the public who may be listening. Welcome to councillors around the table this evening. I'll just go through the requirements to do with health and safety. So I'm Councillor Mark Corey, Chairman of the Scrutiny Panel, which is meeting this evening on the 9th of November. There are no practice evacuations planned for this evening, but if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street, whichever is appropriate, and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel and will be available to watch afterwards. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcomed, but you're requested to set them to silent and to not use voice or camera flash functions. We may break at 7:30, subject to the progress of business. So introductions, I'll go around the table, but I am Councillor Mark Corey and I represent Wivenhoe and I'm chair of the Scrutiny Panel. I'll invite officers and councillors to introduce themselves. From my right, moving on.
I'm Richard Block, Assistant Director for Corporate and Improvement Services and Senior Management Team Support for the panel.
Good evening, Councillor Tina Bourne, Member for Greensted Ward.
Good evening, Lynn Barton, Shrub End Ward.
Good evening, Derek Ludden, Tiptree Ward.
Dennis Willets, Lexton and Braeswick Ward.
Good evening, Nigel Chapman, Rural North Ward.
Good evening, Barbara Wood, Tiptree Ward.
Owen Howell, Clerks of the Committee.
Thank you all and good evening, and we'll soon have an introduction from Councillor Dundas, the leader of the council, who's here this evening, and will scrutinise the portfolio that he has later as agenda item 10. Now, we don't have the minutes of the last meeting, but I just wanted to say the last meeting, I feel at times was less consensual than we would like, and I want to make sure that we try and continue along the lines of more consensual-based scrutiny, and I'm sure we will, and I want to make sure that happens whoever we are scrutinising, and when the portfolio holders come, I want to ensure that we ask the tough questions, but we make sure it does not become sort of arguments. So just wanted to say that. I feel we have the support of officers here, and we did discuss this at the portfolio holder, at the spokesperson's briefings. Councillor Willets, I see you indicating.
Could you just clarify, Chairman, are there to be no minutes of the last meeting then, because of the nature of the exchanges that took place, or are there going to be minutes, but they've not yet been written? Could we? It sounded most mysterious in the way you presented it to us.
Nothing mysterious, Dennis, as I explained earlier. I will get to minutes, that's item 5, but I'll go to Owen now. So we cut out any of the mystery just to ask him where the minutes are. They don't always have to follow directly at the next meeting, but I'm sure Owen will explain a couple of reasons why. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, just to confirm, Councillor Willets, there will be meeting minutes for the previous meeting produced and brought to committee for approval. We have had an issue with the Democratic Services team in that we've been carrying a vacancy for a while, so our resources have been slightly stretched. So I apologise that the meeting minutes for last meeting aren't ready for this meeting, but they will be ready for the next one. At the moment, they've been drafted, and I'm currently getting input from our finance colleagues to make sure that my minuting of the financial matters at that meeting are correct record of what was said. Then, they, as I said, I can assure you they will come back to the committee for your perusal for the next meeting.
Councillor Willets.
Chairman, yes, thank you for that clarification. We now know where we stand. One of the most important items in the minutes that have yet to be written or presented to us was the matter of the youth zone and our decision, or what I believe to be our decision, having just looked at or listened to the transactions as recorded on YouTube, was setting up a doubly urgent action group to deal with the all-party issue of the youth zone. And in the absence of the minutes, it would appear that although members were prepared to meet in the hours, if not the days, immediately after the scrutiny panel to push this matter forward, no progress has been made because we don't have the minutes which sort of authorises us to go off and do it. I wonder whether you could make a sort of a statement on progress of our subcommittee on the youth zone, given just how important members across the political spectrum consider it to be, and the fact that it hasn't met and we don't have a minute which says that it should meet.
That's a very, very valid point, Councillor Willits. Thank you. I believe we probably can go ahead without that minute, especially as it did go to Cabinet and in principle, I believe was agreed. So that will be something, whereas we as spokespersons should get on and get a date in the diary or dates in the diary very soon. So thank you for raising that. It's a very good point. And I don't think we have to wait. So I think we should get on with that. And that's something I might speak to Owen about finding dates for the diaries, but it might be something that does not require officer time. It will just be us, but I will ask for support in terms of getting dates in the diary for that. Thank you, Dennis. That's a very handy reminder. I've just seen Councillor Lorcan Whitehead arrive. Lorcan, would you just like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Lorcan Whitehead, Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Thank you. So there are no substitutions this evening. We are all members of this panel. There are no urgent items either. And are there any declarations of interest at all? No? Okay, thank you. Then item 5 would have been the minutes, but we've had an explanation as to why we have not got them as yet. So we will move on and look for those, but we will take an action. And Owen, I hope you've noted that, to get on with that subgroup, which is urgently needed to talk about the youth zone. Item 7, decisions taken under special urgency provisions. There are none. Item 8, cabinet or portfolio holder decisions called in for review. There are none. Item 9, items requested by members of the panel or other members, apart from the point just made by Councillor Willits, there are none. And item 10 is the main item this evening. It's the portfolio holder briefing from Councillor Dundas. His portfolio, being leader of the council, is strategy, and we have sent round the scheme of delegation for that strategy portfolio and what the leader of the council has to do. That email went to all members of the committee. So I'll invite Councillor Dundas forward, please.
Good evening, Chair.
Good evening, Paul. Good evening. And I hoped, Paul, that you could perhaps take a few minutes, not too long, but a few minutes just to outline your progress so far and how you see the portfolio. Thank you.
I can. Yeah, I don't want to turn it into a sort of hour-long sort of political broadcast, and I'm sure I don't think anybody would appreciate that. So I'll try and keep it fairly brief, and then I'm sure in your questioning, if there's other specific areas you want to pick up on, I'll try and expand them. Firstly, just a couple of general comments, as I think I'm sure Councillor Corey is aware. It's when you read the actual scheme of delegation for the leader of the council, it's quite a strange one, actually, in that on one level, it kind of contains everything. On another level, it doesn't actually contain very much, because a lot of the real detailed issues we discuss a lot in the council and as councillors are contained within other portfolios. The role of the leader is obviously to have an oversight as to what's going on in every portfolio and every part of the council, and try and bring it together in, to quote the actual name of the role, a strategic fashion. But if you actually read the list of things, it's not that specific. But what I will just try and do is perhaps pick up on and run through perhaps a few of the actual numbered items which are in the portfolio, and perhaps go through some of the details on them. Obviously, the promotion of the council of national, regional, strategic partnerships, I think most of us know what those partnerships are. Most of them have continued much as they were because they're set up over long term. One of the new ones which we are part of is a refugee task force, which is Essex based. You may well be aware, I don't want to get into too much details because they don't like making too much of it public, but Colchester has been at the forefront of receiving refugees under a number of schemes over the last few months. That is a relationship between us, Chelmsford and Essex County Council, between the three leaders of those councils. It's met several times already, and I've been pleased at the attendance and the engagement from the Home Office, from a number of groups. So that's certainly a new things. We are trying to increase or better our relationship with the university. I think that probably during COVID, actually, I don't think perhaps we've met quite enough as much, maybe because some of them haven't been about, but that's certainly something we're looking at. I'm also very keen, I think our relationship with Essex County Council, for various reasons, and I think some of it naturally, let's be candid, comes down to politics, and I do understand why, but we need a good relationship with the County Council. We might not always like them, we might not always agree with them, but if we actually want to achieve good long-term goals for Colchester, I think we have to work with them in a positive manner. I seem to remember, I think it was the first cabinet meeting, I think it was Councillor Scott who said, does that mean that Colchester is now a vassal state of Chelmsford or Essex County Council? No, it does not. Believe me, I have absolutely no hesitation about being very critical of the County Council and pushing back against things which I think they are doing which are not right for Colchester. But I do want to work with them. I do want to work with them potentially around master planning for the town centre. The reality is they do transport, we don't. They own quite big chunks of land in the town centre which they are looking to regenerate. We own quite large chunks of land in the town centre we're looking to regenerate. If we don't have some sort of joined up plan together, it won't work. You know, there is literally the case that you could end up with a bike lane which meets a wall, you know, which so we need to have that joint strategy. Equally, I do want to improve or continue to improve our relationships with tendering and Braintree, both on an individual personal level between portfolio holders and with the council in general. Again, being candid, politically, actually, I think at times the previous administration had a better relationship than we did, than my party did with the leading groups in those councils. That was down to one particular issue, which has now really been settled one way or the other. So I've certainly been trying to rebuild those relationships, and I think it has helped. I think it is getting better. I want to recognise the benefit of our commercial activities via CCHL, but I do think it's always very important that we recognise by nature we can't guarantee their returns. They will go up and down, and I think perhaps it concerns me slightly that we tend to look ahead and put into our budget forecast assumed profits. I'm a great believer that nothing's a profit till it's in the bank, and we can suddenly find our planning to do lots of wonderful things in 2 or 3 years' time on the back of commercial profits coming in. If they don't come in, then we're suddenly in trouble. So I'm more inclined to say, well, let's get them in the bank first and then we'll work out how to spend them, because the reality of the commercial world is nothing is guaranteed. You know, things make losses and go wrong. Otherwise, let's face it, every company would make an enormous profit and never get into trouble, would they? With regards to CCHL, I want to see a long-term plan for CAHL, Colchester and Fora Housing Limited. I do feel that unless we think about the long-term plans for that company, it doesn't have a long-term future, because at the moment it is primarily engaged with developing land which is owned by CBC. We only have a finite amount of land. We have quite a few projects coming through in the immediate 2 or 3 years, but when you look at how housing companies work, they work on a 10 to 20 year cycle. So if we're not doing something now to look at what that company will be doing in 10 years' time, it will hit a dead end. And if we are looking at this company as being providing housing of perhaps a higher standard and a different type that the commercial sector sometimes delivers, simultaneously delivering some return back to the council, if we haven't got a long-term plan in there now, that will come to an end, in my view. I think also on the commercial side, I think we need to look at the financial performance of our leisure services. We are an expanding borough, therefore in theory, demand for leisure services should be expanding. Are we meeting that? How do we meet that? And can we increase our profits out of it potentially? Going forward from whatever happens with the local plan, I would like to see us look at our infrastructure deficit. There was a study done 2 or 3 years ago which came up with a figure of about 300 million, but I don't think we've ever really analysed that properly. As part of also, and I think it probably comes into my portfolio, we need to find a replacement chief executive in the near future, which I know all groups will be involved in. Hopefully we can all find the right person and all agree on it. And that's certainly the way I'd like it to be done. Going back to the list, strategic leadership of the Joint Tendering Colchesters Borders Garden Community, with that wonderful name, which hopefully they'll come up with another one. We spoke a lot about that last night. I think as far as the role which I currently have, along with Councillor Ellis and Councillor Corey with the steering group, I suspect the steering group will come to kind of a natural end in the sense that it might still continue to meet, but a great deal of the things it does will shift into potentially a joint committee, or if we don't have the joint committee, into the local plan committees initially of tendering and Colchester. Where we go with that, I think, and the discussions which came out of last night, I think next week we'll probably know before Cabinet whether there's broad political support for it or not. If there isn't broad support for it, I will pull it from Cabinet or not go ahead with it, because it is not going to work otherwise, because we need to think about, we need everybody, there's going to be lots of different people and lots of different parties on that committee over the next 20 years. If you've got some parties think I don't want to do this, we shouldn't be doing it, it won't work because our partners won't trust us, basically. They'll say, well, it's great, you're here for 3 months or 2 years or whatever, but the next person comes along and just voted against it in full council, you know. And that's certainly what they've said at the meetings. Communication strategy and external communications. I am trying to encourage, I mean, I think we've got a very good comms team in CBC, but I am trying to encourage them to look at new opportunities, constantly modernise. I can't claim that I'm a comms expert on social media or new opportunities, but I'm sure they're there. So that's certainly something I'll be talking about, and that probably comes under the oversight of the council's use of social media and social media policy. Are we maximising our use of it? I don't actually know the answer to that, but it's certainly a question I'm saying to our officers, but actually we need to be asking ourselves that question. Member development for all councillors. We had a meeting, I think it was last week, with the member development group, which was quite good. I think we all expressed a desire to perhaps promote a way that councillors talk to each other a bit more informally. We've spoken about it for a long time. We've never quite come up with a way to do it, but there was a fairly general agreement we should. There was also agreement that I think, going back to the commercial operations of the council, that a lot of members don't fully understand what they are, what they do, what they're doing. And I think there should be more briefing on that. The strategic plan, well, I voted for the existing strategic plan, so I can't sort of pull it apart now and say I'm going to throw it in the bin and come up with a new one, because I'd look a bit ridiculous. It runs to 2023. I support the general themes in the vast majority of it, so I haven't been minded to make any vast changes to it, but obviously we do need to start looking at the one which will replace it in 2024. A couple of things which to pick up on that, which I'm very keen on. It talks about particularly we're maintaining all our environmental commitments. I'm also trying to task portfolio holders to really have a constant overview of what they're doing in terms of improving the environmental performance of their portfolios and reporting back to me on a regular basis, because I think we need to keep the pressure up. Small things can make a lot of difference. So I'm really pressuring them to keep up with that. The strategic plan talks about the rollout of gigabit services to elsewhere in the borough. It's financially dependent, like all these things, but I'm very keen that we've done lots of really good things to the town centre recently. We've got the full fibre broadband, we've got the new CCTV system, but that is in the town centre, and we are one borough, and we can't ever forget that we've got lots of bits of the borough all over the place. All our residents are equally important. They all pay their council tax. So I do want to find ways, if we possibly can, to see the CCTV, to see the full fibre broadband rolled out to elsewhere in the borough. I know with the broadband, it's got a lot further than people think it has. There are nodes out in all sorts of places, Stanway, Wivenhoe, up to the Northern Gateway. But it's getting to the next phase where commercially we get that actually out into subscribers. The Levelling Up Fund, now, we didn't bid last year, and I agreed with the decision not to bid, because we were in, I think, sort of a championship league in terms of the list which came out from the government as to our priority. But it's something I'm considering, or tasking officers to put together to bid for, probably around June. I think that's when it's due. And that may well centre around some town centre things. It's something I also want to work with the town board on, which I'm going to come to in a minute. Again, going back to the commercial side, I think we really, in councillors, perhaps need to look at and understand the financial relationship between CCHL and CBC, particularly around how we deal with tax liabilities, how we deal with judging their successful performance around dividends and the service level agreement and service agreement, because being a boring old accountant, sometimes just declaring a whopping great profit and patting yourself on the back and paying a load of corporation tax isn't necessarily the best way to do it. So we need to be careful how we judge the success of those companies. And I think in terms of the financial position of the council, it is challenging. We discussed it last month, and it will be challenging for whichever person, whichever party, whichever combination of parties is running this council. The basic facts will not change for anybody. The next 2 or 3 years are going to be challenging, and we have to find a way of maintaining the level of services and the quality of services our residents expect. And it's going to be hard, but I have a lot of faith in our officers that we're going to be able to do it. But it probably will constrain us, being honest, in some of the other things we would like to expand into and want to do, like CCTV, like youth zones. And I'm not saying that politically; it's just the reality. And I suppose finally, one of the things I've tried to bring about is, I think, this sounds like a criticism, but it's not. It's just human nature, actually. I do think we all need to remember to listen more. I think we're perhaps, as a council, being a bit secretive in how we've approached things with residents, or how we've sold plans to residents, particularly around some developments. So I would genuinely like the council to be a little bit more open. And I do seem to have gone completely off script from my list of items from my portfolios and done a bit partly with the grant. So I apologise for that. I didn't intend to do that, but I've just tried to give you perhaps a few ideas of where we're coming from, and I'm really genuinely happy to pick up on any specifics in the portfolio or around the council. What I won't do, because it would be unfair of me to do it, is to really stray into detail and sort of put my tanks on the lawn, so to speak, and other portfolio holders, because they are going to come here and speak to you. They know more about their portfolios than I do. So I'm happy to give a general overview on some of those things. But if we get into detail, I'll say, I've seen the work programme, they're all coming here soon. I'll save the detailed questions for them. I hope that's a good start.
Thank you, Paul. I'm sure we'll have many questions either from what you've outlined there or other parts of the portfolio. I will look around the room and see if anyone indicating. Councillor Bourne, please. Tina.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dundas. Actually, I thought that was a very honest appraisal of what you've been up to. Two things. I'm really pleased with the continuing welcoming of refugee families and that you've managed to bring in Chelmsford as well on that. I think that's a really good partnership between the two largest local authorities in Essex and Essex themselves, and maintaining our long-held wish and actually achievement in being a borough of sanctuary. So I was worried that that wasn't going to continue. So I'm really pleased about that. I think it's very interesting when you gave about us information about finances and the reality that we've got 51 councillors and very few of those councillors get the opportunity to be a cabinet member, and even fewer get the opportunity to be leader of the council or group leader. And you do see things, differently. And I wondered if you could, whether you'd reflected on the last, is it 6 months, 5 months? Whether this council could do more to prepare people for leadership, because we had a long administration before, and people get out the habit of doing things, and things have changed. You know, local authorities change, local government changes, and I think if we want the best for our council from our councillors, maybe you coming in as a relative newbie sees things in a different way. Now, I may not agree with those things, but I think that's also equally important to do. That's a nice bit. I've got some questions. It feels to me that you, in this broader sense of the word you, have been a bit invisible. And I wondered whether that is down to camera shy cabinet members, or whether that's actually a strategy that you've adhered to over time. You did say, Councillor Dundas, about relationship building, how important it is, and that is obviously done through national, regional, sub-regional, county, North Essex, business, voluntary sector partnerships. And I don't see much of that in the local paper, whether that's the hard copy or online, which makes me feel that things have been a bit invisible. I'm sure there have been things going on in the background, but I don't want to wait until the Conservative newsletter comes through my door to find out what's been going on. Just wonder what your take on that was. My other question, if I may, Chair, is about, I remember you came to, might have been the cabinet member or it might have been full council. You talked about grand plans for housing on a strategic level without unnecessary development. And could you just give us an outline of what you had planned for or talked about strategically with the Vineyard Gate and Britannia car parks for any development?
Thank you, Tina. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you. I'll just wait for the. Yep, that's gone. Certainly, yeah. On the refugee task force, yes. I mean, Chelmsford and Colchester have probably been more involved than any other authorities in Essex in this. As you may well be aware, Colchester has been working with the MOD over securing some properties. It's proven quite challenging, actually. It sounds very simple, doesn't it? Well, MOD are offering 10 properties, but we'll sign something and sort it out. It's actually proved very difficult over the tenancies because of regulations around the fact that as an authority, we can't offer an assured short hold tenancy, and you effectively have to declare somebody homeless. And then we think we're there now, but it's taken a disappointingly long time. It's not anybody's fault. Officers have been working incredibly hard on it, but it's taken a while. But yes, no, I'm proud of our response on it. I'm not going to pretend, it's been led by the Home Office. So I'm not claiming that Colchester has led in any way, because we haven't, but certainly when we've been asked, we've responded in a positive way. On the preparation, that's an interesting one. I think it's a very good point. I think when you're not a portfolio holder, there is actually quite a lot of information out there if you go looking for it. I think I was quite lucky the last couple of years. I was on Scrutiny and Governance and Audit, so I spent a lot of time looking at budget papers and asking questions about them. So myself, I had a fairly good idea, I think, of where the council stood financially, but I think that's just because I'm a bit boring and like reading 100 pages of numbers. I think a lot of councillors don't, and that's not a criticism. Why would they? There's lots of things they like reading I don't read, and I think you're right. I think that there isn't perhaps the level of understanding of how the council operates financially and its good aspects and bad aspects among all 51 councillors. And I think it is perhaps something, it's difficult, it's the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but people have got to be interested in it and want to go out there and learn it, because there is a heck of a lot to learn. And yeah, I've certainly found it a big learning curve. And I think perhaps it's something the member development panel could talk about a bit more. What does a portfolio holder do? Because if you haven't been a portfolio holder before, there's no reason you should know. And I think perhaps in all groups, we suffer a bit from a lack of succession planning, that we have people in certain roles for year after year after year. And the reason they're in that is actually because we can't find anybody to replace them. So yeah, I think that's a very good thing perhaps to take to the member development panel, and I think it's a good point. In terms of visible, it's certainly not. It's not deliberate. It's not deliberate. I'm not somebody myself who, I have no ego to bruise in terms of popping up here, there, and everywhere. That's not what I'm interested in or getting into. I have a perfect face for radio, perhaps, but that's about it. I think I have tried to encourage actually cabinet members to be slightly more visible, and I think they are taking that on board. I think, being again candid, they've just been on a really steep learning curve and have been really trying to get to grips with their portfolios. I think they have found their feet now. So this might not be something you want to hear. I think you probably will see a bit more of them, because I think that they are feeling a lot more confident in their roles to be able to go out there and talk to people. Certainly, obviously, in terms of our connections with other groups, yeah, we've been very active in maintaining those relationships. I could list you all the meetings I go to and put our side of the case. So it's certainly that they're not happening, but I do take that on board, and I think that's good advice. On the housing, what we said, certainly in terms of the overall strategy, we accept that we have an OAN number of 920 a year, which we've adopted into the local plan. Our view is to try and build that. We don't really want to go over, but we recognise we can't go under. And I'm not going to kid anybody, we can't. Vineyard Gate, yes, we are looking at Vineyard Gate and Britannia. The plans, as you know, there have been lots of plans. And that is one of the areas which perhaps we are thinking about whether to make that one or both of those areas the focus of a levelling up bid. Because if we had some extra money, there's some things we could do on those sites around the mix of housing, possible transport infrastructure, which we probably can't do on a purely commercial basis without some extra money. So that is one of the things we're looking at putting together. It's also one of the areas we're looking at working with county on, because they have a St Botolph's development plan as well. it would be daft not to try and tie all those things in and have one central cohesive redevelopment plan and regeneration plan for that part of the town, which I think we can probably all agree, out of all the parts of the town, it's probably the area which needs it the most. By town centre, probably needs it the most. So that is what we're trying to put together. And I would like potentially to see it as the focus for levelling up bid.
Thank you. I saw Councillor Chapman indicate next, so Nigel, please.
Thank you, Mark. Paul, yeah, I'll apologise to everybody first because I'm going to do what I always do. I'm afraid, having been around a long while, I do tend to go back into the dim and distant past for some of these things. One thing I will pick up, and several people around the table here will agree with me, I'm sure. You were talking about relationships between councillors, and you said, what can you do about it? Well, actually, I'll tell you what the easiest thing is to get together before meetings. We had the old teas in the, I sound like John Jowers here, in the old public library. We could talk to each other, and it was a friendly, good atmosphere, and you could just understand what other people wanted to do in their committee or whatever. I know we haven't got committees these days, but I think something like that is a far better way of trying to get people just to get to know each other than anything else, frankly. And it would make a lot of difference to how this council runs these days, particularly with the COVID situation. It means we really don't see hardly anybody else. We're just beginning to get together now. And I think that's very important. Somehow, if you can get something like that, engender something like that, again in the future, that would be very helpful. Two other things. I was interested also in what you were saying about the University of Essex. Again, I'm going back a long while. I can remember saying many years ago, the difficulty we've always got with that is Colchester Borough is on this hill, University of Essex is on that hill, and it's getting the two hills to meet in the middle, and that's always been a challenge for Colchester Town, I think, for the borough. And I think that does need a lot of work to bridge that gap, if you like, somehow. So I can understand that challenge, but it's always been there. So it does need a lot of work, and I don't know what the answer is on that. The other point two other points really was just to flag up, come from all this side, I suspect, Paul, about making sure you keep the rural areas on board, the true rural areas. You know, my parish councils feel totally neglected, frankly. And you're saying the same thing tonight again about levelling up fund, which will be spent in the town centre. You know, as I said at the last council meeting, I'm all for spending money in the town centre. You know, generations have lived in the town centre. Generations, my forebears lived in the town centre. And I'm very much, I do want to support Colchester Town, but we've equally got to show how that will benefit the rural areas and how we can bring them into the town centre, which they don't see at the moment because they just haven't got that sense of simple things like cycleways. You know, from villages, they don't work. You know, there's no cycleways, and the only way you can get in is on some very, very busy roads. So I think there needs to be some form of trying to work with the parishes if you can do that. And again, it'd be interesting. You talked about who the strategic partnerships, and again, it's another thing that's always been very difficult. But there are councils to the north, beyond the river that borders my ward. You know, Suffolk and Baber and that sort of thing. I mean, I know it is hard work with tending because again, they're on the east of my ward. And we are trying to work with them on various things at the moment. But it just could be useful just to think about them as well, particularly highways, traffic and that sort of thing, because the routes that join us to East Anglia, if you like, whether we're in East Anglia or not, I don't know. Some people say we're not. Some people say just my ward maybe. But there's a lot of need to be a lot of communications, I think, on those roads because they are all deteriorating and nobody actually seems to be terribly worried about them, I don't think, either side. So that's the other thing. The final thing I want to say, which I won't go into detail on this one, but you talked about concerns about amphora housing, amphora homes. I think you just need to flag up the future of Colchester Borough homes as well. I mean, there are financial issues around that with the decline in council housing stock, which will impact on the housing revenue account and that sort of thing in years to come. And that needs to be on the near horizon. So that's really all I want to say at this moment anyway. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nigel. Perhaps a couple of points to pick up there, Paul?
Yeah, I think so. Firstly, yes, I think I think for as long as I can remember, I've heard this word members' teasers come up. We've always, somebody was going to say it, so I thought I'll be the first to say it. I don't know, do we actually say, yes, everybody chuck in a £5 do it. I don't know. Funny enough, at the last member development meeting, I said the one thing we've got coming up, which I always like about the December full council, is everybody gets together, has a cup of tea, and we present the certificates to past councillors and that. And then poor Richard had to say, I'm ever so sorry that won't be happening this year due to COVID. So there we go. It's a bit disappointing, but yeah, I mean, I think that has to go through the member development panel, and it has to be discussed group, across groups. It's not a decision I would make. I would be quite in favour of it. We won't charge the public purse. We'd pay for a cup of coffee, but why not? Yeah, the university relations. Well, there's a sort of another. You could get into very analogies about, meet at the bottom of the hill and don't fall in the river. But it's the university is one of the most important things in the borough. It's a great asset to the borough. And I just think, the more we can talk and find common ground, the better. I mean, rural areas, parish councils, I've been to calc meetings. I've met quite a lot of the parish councils who, I'm a big supporter of parish councils. I'm still one myself. I know their good points. I know their bad points. Yeah, you're right that it tends to be, and this is governments of all favours, so this isn't a political point at all. When you're looking at accessing regeneration money and funds, they do tend to focus on town centres, city centres, urban areas. They don't tend to focus on villages much. That's been the case for a long time. I can't lie, it probably is the case at the moment a bit. It's quite, there's not many schemes to access big amounts of money for rural areas. But we are, I'm conscious of it. But it is challenging, but I do understand. On the relationships, you're quite right. You make a good point about relationships with our neighbours in Suffolk. We do have relationships with them, perhaps not quite as close as Tendring and Braintree. One of the reasons being that obviously with Tendring and Braintree, we share a county council, so there's more connections there. And when we're talking about highways, the perennial problem of district and borough councils trying to get influence over highways, you're talking about a highways relationship within Suffolk. So, that will always primarily come down to a Suffolk-Essex relationship rather than between a district and a borough council. We always want to put our oar in on highways and do what we can because we know what all the issues are. But equally, we do know that our powers are limited, unfortunately.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. I have Councillor Barton next, please. Lynn.
Thank you. Yeah, owing to COVID and the reduction of funding from government, the previous administration were carrying out a review of all our assets, obviously with a view to looking at ways in which they can be better used and ways of generating more income. Now, you've mentioned Britannia and Vineyard Gate, but one of the significant, sort of fairly controversial ones is the Udo Road tennis courts. It is an underused resource and it is costing the taxpayer a significant amount of money. So I wonder if you could give an update on what your thinking is on that site at this moment in time, please. Thank you.
Yes, I can. Yeah, you're right that it's currently, I won't mention the figure because it might be commercially sensitive, but it's losing money at the moment. My view is it needs to be switched around to making money. It can't go on like it is. We are developing what I hope will come together, some quite good plans with a couple of groups around maintaining it primarily as a tennis centre. There is potentially money available from the LTA to redevelop or better expression, we do it up, bring it up to standard and make it commercially viable. We have actually got some interested part. I won't go into too much details, but we have got some people interested in also running it on a commercial basis. So at the moment, I'm quite hopeful that we're going to be able to do something quite positive with it and maintaining it as a tennis centre, which is not, maybe not exactly the same as it is at the moment, but is not a drain. In fact, rather than being a drain, actually has a net benefit to the council's financial bottom line.
Thank you. I'll ask a few questions now as I haven't seen any other indications just yet. The strategic plan, you said I haven't made any vast changes yet. which is on one hand positive. You clearly think it's a very good plan that the last administration put together, and obviously I signed off on. But I just wondered if not vast changes, what changes would we see? What sort of strategic vision are you aiming towards that perhaps is different to what the last administration had? And then, well, I'll let you answer that one first of all, and then I'll look around the room for any other points and then come back to some others as well. But I was going to ask about member development and any other ideas for that, but we have touched on that. But if you've got any further ideas, I'd like to hear that as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, no, as I said, I voted for and supported the strategic plan at full council. So I think I spoke, in fact, I can't remember. I think I did speak in favour of it. But I mean, I think as an overarching set of aims, I think it's pretty good. You know, I didn't criticise it at the time. Obviously, how you perhaps get to some of those aims, that there are different ways you can do it. You know, if we look at some of the words, you know, address the, which I'd agree with, address the inequality of access to gigabit broadband in community as well. We just spoke about the rural things, but there's lots of ways you could do that. Do you do it through a do it on a commercial basis or less commercial basis, or do we do it ourselves? Do we get somebody in to do it? You know, that there are lots of ways around that. Agree a town deal with partners. Well, we've agreed that. Government significant new investment. Absolutely. We talked about the levelling up bid, which I think we would hope to do. I'm sure Council Laws would talk at length about promote Colchester's heritage and business attractions, but again, there are different ways you could do that. He may well have different plans to what existed before. The bid we're supportive of, so I don't think we're likely to change much around that. We've committed to 30% affordable housing, so we would agree with that. So I don't anticipate, in terms of the headline strategic aims, changing much between now and 2023. I think we will continue, because I think and credit where credit's due. I thought it set a good set of reasonable objectives for the council. But, we have detailed different ideas. Udo Road is one of them. We have different plans there. We may well have different plans as to how we actually do develop Vineyard Gate and Britannia, in terms of the mix and how we finance it, and whether it's a joint project with Essex County Council. We may look, depending on what happens with the local plan, as to what we do with it next. Do we go for an early review? Do we look at an infrastructure deficit analysis? Because I think we need one. So that's certainly something we might add in, because I think ignore politics. I think we can all agree that probably infrastructure has been one of the most challenging things in Colchester for a long time. We can disagree perhaps why or how we change it, but I think we do need to perhaps analyse what we really need, because I'm not sure we really know. We know we need it, but do we actually know what? Do we need more roads? Do we need more rail? Do we need more? I don't know, because I think we're very good at talking to residents and saying we need more infrastructure, but then they say what infrastructure are you going to put in? And then that's suddenly when councillors, we go, oh, we sort of stutter a bit and say, well, we need this, need that, but we don't actually really know what perhaps we need in Colchester. So I think if I was to change one thing in the strategic plan, it's actually giving a clearer view as to what our long-term plan is around infrastructure in Colchester and what we think it needs. Now, whether we can get it or not is, of course, a different stage, but you need to know what you're actually looking for before you can go out there and actually find a way of doing it. And I'm not actually sure, perhaps we really know in our heart of hearts what we're looking for yet on that.
Okay, thank you. I'd very much support work on infrastructure, and I'll come back to that shortly. I do recall you talking about a 20-point plan, so perhaps that isn't coming forward or isn't part of it, but you might talk about 20 more detailed points within the strategic plan, different to what was being delivered before. But secondly, on infrastructure, I reinstigated the 5-a-side meetings that we have with highways. Because you strayed onto that area, I'd like you to just give us a quick update how that's going. It was positive, and that was one of the positive relationships that had started rebuilding with county, I would say, at the time that I was experiencing it. And through that, some of the best successes were green infrastructure, which I think must be the leading ethos when we look at infrastructure around this town, because we have such high pollution hotspots. We need to make sure we've got legitimate and bought into by the public green infrastructure that allows us to walk, cycle, and any other new technologies that come forward. That will include, as you know, the RTS routes and what can be done there in the most logical way, but I'll leave that for you and I to talk about other times. But I just thought I'd emphasize that, see if you want to respond before I go to others. Thank you.
Yes, certainly the 5-a-side, and you're right. I think they're a very valuable forum. We've had some good meetings. The last one was last week or the week before. There are been a lot of talk about the active travel plans and schemes. I think I'm right in saying that they have finalised the detail on the cycling routes. There's been, as you know, there have been various proposals come and gone, mainly down to the financing and the budgets coming out as to what the schemes actually cost. There's been a lot of emphasis on that. There's been a lot of talk about the RTS and the actual route of it. My concern about the RTS is firstly, or the concerns I've raised, is ensuring that it fits in with the active travel plans. What I don't want is a situation where we put something in on a roundabout which costs a lot of money, which puts a new cycle lane in, and then 18 months later they come away and take it out because they say they've got the RTS has got to go through there. So I have laboured the point long and hard about making sure that all the future plans for Colchester are actually joined up at the county level. There is a question which I'm still not fully satisfied about, how the RTS gets through the town centre in an efficient manner, and also how that may potentially constrain ours or any future administration's plans around pedestrianisation of any areas. I don't particularly want a scheme for the RTS which ties our hands long term, which is potential. I don't think it will. There's the potential there, and it's best to ask the questions now rather than in 10 years' time. Again, with the RTS, I'm quite keen on some sort of proper transport interchange hub, whatever you want to call it. So we've discussed that. We also started talking about, as you may well know, I can't remember the acronyms for the government's active travel scheme funds. I can't remember. I think it was something AT1 or something, but they have announced phase 2. And that's something I would be keen to see Colchester, if we could, via Essex County Council, take advantage of. But that's very early days on that, because I know the government have announced it, but I'm not sure if they've really announced who and where and when one applies. But we have started talking about that. And of course, as you will be aware, there are lots of discussions about the day-to-day issues which councillors have brought up, and things around the town and around the borough, which we try and get our message across to Essex County Council, and they're generally quite positive and listen to our concerns. But we're the people tend to be a little bit more on the ground, and it's important we get our message through to counties, so that's what we use them for.
Thank you. There's some of that I definitely agree with. It's that joined up approach I don't think we've had from county on infrastructure, and we need to, especially with the challenge of the climate emergency, need to do that more and more. And I think we have on the green issues. But anyway, I'll move on. Thank you. Councillor Lorcan Whitehead, please. Lorcan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Dundas. I suppose I'm hearing so far this evening that that not much is envisaged to change under your leadership as compared to the previous administration, in terms of kind of aims or big decisions, or there might be, I suppose, I think the message I'm hearing is that maybe around some of the detail. And I'm a bit surprised because I was expecting big change, because I think that's been the message probably coming out of your party locally in recent years, is that the previous administration was getting lots of things very wrong, and we needed a big shift in a different direction. So I'm just wondering, are there any big changes in the pipeline, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, can I come straight back in? I mean, first thing I would say that when a new administration comes in, you naturally, and this applies to anybody, you inherit a lot of ongoing work. Okay, so you can't, unless you really just want to chuck an enormous amount of money down the drain, which isn't a very sensible thing to do at the moment, then you can perhaps change some of the ongoing things, but if you're sensible, you have to accept, well, actually, if it wasn't a bad idea and we've spent a lot of money on it anyway, let's carry on with it. So it does actually realistically take a number of years before you can start to really put your own stamp on things. I'd freely admit that. I think the other thing which perhaps changed, obviously, we've had COVID. So I am not of a mindset this year to go the proverbial bull in the china shop at things when the council, its officers, its financial position, and indeed the borough are coming out of probably the most difficult period since the Second World War. You have to be reasonably sensible about how these things, and people can accuse me of many things, but I like to think I'm reasonably sensible. But we do have our projects, which we like and which we don't. And I think that as we evolve going forward into the spring, you will start to see, I don't want to get really into other people's portfolios and things, or perhaps start announcing election manifestos, but I think you will hopefully see us put our stamp more and more on it. But the things I said I supported in opposition, like the 30% housing, like the 100 homes project, like a lot of the work this council does with its partners to genuinely help a lot of people in Colchester, I'm not going to become leader of the council and then suddenly change my mind on things I said 18 months ago just for the hell of it. That's not what I'm in politics in any shape or format to do. But I think come the spring, I would hope you will see us lay out what will be our real vision, which we've put together after a year in power. So yeah, watch this space. That's probably what I'd say.
If I may come back, I'm on tenterhooks. So I guess, I mean, there was a couple of things I sort of, couple of things that have been consistent messages, I think, from your party in recent years around changes. And one of them in particular was that Colchester is building too much, more than we need to. We should be building less. We're being a soft touch on that front. And of course, I mean, I suppose I wonder on that front if you could give us more detail, I mean, about how you're going to address, because that's been a consistent message, I think, from your party over recent years. How are you going to do that differently and actually achieve lower numbers of houses than the previous administration was building? And another one, and I think it's been a consistent message also tonight in your presentation, has been around. I don't think you put it in these terms tonight. I think the terms. I was actually looking back through your very polished election video of 10 pledges, and one of those was to stop wasting money. And I think that's kind of come through maybe in a different language tonight around the need to look at the commercial side and to to look at the good and bad aspects of how Colchester Borough Council operates commercially. So, I mean, it seems to me like that would be an area where I would be expecting to hear maybe a bit more detail around, where is this waste that you are intending to do something about, and what is your plan to do something about it?
Thanks. Yes, I mean, on the housing side, I'd pick up on that earlier. I've always been realistic that what we actually said was, I feel that we have an OIN number of 920 a year. And I think that is the number we should aim for. Over a number of years, under different administrations, we have built more than that. It's been to the 1100 level at some years. I can't remember the exact average. Councillor Ellis will be able to furnish you at great length with many years of details of housing numbers. I think if we get to the point that we do, and it's not my decision, it's council's decision, full council's decision, adopt section 2. I would be minded at that point to really combine with, and again, Councillor Ellis will be able to give you more details because he's more of an expert on this than I am, with an infrastructure review to really look at that OAN number and see if we can challenge it. But that would probably involve a review of the local plan, an early review. Certainly some of the things we've looked at, we think perhaps it could. I'm not against house building, people have got to live somewhere, okay? It's just whether Colchester, in comparison to some of our neighbours, frankly, and other similar authorities, we do have a very high number, and it is a burden on us. And people do want to come and live in Colchester, which is good, So yeah, I think we will look to challenge it. But in the short term, as we said, and what we said last year, if you read the details, is that our target on house building would be 920 a year, because that is what we're currently required to build under the local plan. And that's the number long term. If we want to get it down, we probably have to change.
And would it be reasonable to say it's a commitment to not build more than 920 a year under Conservative administration? Yeah,
that's our instruction. I mean, you get averages. The way houses are delivered, some years you'll get 800, some years you'll get 1,000. That's how, because they don't all pitch up on December the 31st and say, well, I built 920, I'll stop for 3 days and I'll come back and do the one on January the 1st. That's how it works. We know that. But that is what I'm aiming to do, yes, in as much as we have control over the year-to-year numbers, but over the 15-year plan period, that is what we're required to build, and I don't want to see us go over that.
May I?
Yeah, on the money side, we felt there were a few things which were wasted money on. Elephants, I'm not going to mention, but we had a few things.
That didn't happen. It was stopped. Just to be clear, the elephant.
I'm not to say any more on it.
There's no elephant in the room. There's no elephant in culture.
I promise. Yeah, I mean, I am always concerned about some of the commercial operations and some of our commercial projects as to whether they are perhaps going to deliver what we hope they'll deliver. And whether perhaps in a couple of cases we should continue with them. But I'm not going to get into sunk cost fallacy. That really would bore us. But there are a couple, yeah. So we are trying to, where we think there's money to be saved, and hopefully it will come out, we'll be able to detail it at the end of the year, where we think we have saved some money. We are trying to run things a little bit more efficiently where we can. I have to say our officers have been very responsive in helping us. But as I said also at the beginning, the challenge for me and anybody in my position is to be financially responsible while simultaneously trying to retain the level of service and quality of service we want for our residents. And yeah, it'll be challenging for everybody over the next 2 or 3 years. But I'll try and come up with some good examples for you. And I know some of the other portfolio holders might be able to come armed with a few ready.
Thank you. I think we'd all appreciate that. And just another one on it came up in one of your answers previously about where you might do something differently within the detail. Was the Udo Road tennis courts, which is an issue which is of interest to residents in my ward as well, who may be using those. And so I'm just wondering, are you able to say a bit more about what you think you would do differently there? And also, just picking up your suggestion that we must make it commercially viable, profitable. I'm wondering, is that really a necessity? I mean, part of what a council is capable of doing is subsidising certain services because they are public goods. And, we know how important, health is, exercise, activity. So I'm just wondering, is it your view that it's absolutely necessary that that Udo Road tennis courts, every aspect of the council must turn a profit, or are there areas that might be subsidised as public goods, and could perhaps Udo Road tennis courts be one?
I think that's a really good philosophical question, actually, and I think whenever we're dealing with council services, you have got pure public service at one end, and ultimate total commerciality on the other. And it's where do we sit on that line? And I can think of long evenings of governance and audit discussing amphora over the last few years, where we all try and think about actually where we want to sit on that. I think, I don't want us to be, David, or mentioning a big commercial leisure service which absolutely wants to match the profits of a leisure company. I don't think that'd be right. But I think on the potential figures, and I don't want to get into details on Udo Road because there are detailed discussions going on and I don't want to go and jeopardise anything. I'm reasonably confident that we can get it to a position where at least it isn't costing anything. Okay, but I'm not necessarily looking to make money out of it, which matches what a purely commercial investor would look to do. I think the main thing perhaps with a lot of our facilities is that we might not particularly want to make a huge profit because we do recognise the social aspect, but we have to ensure that the income gives us a long-term investment pot, because otherwise we won't be able to maintain our facilities. What will happen is all our sports facilities and other facilities around the borough, they'll decline in quality because they're not generating enough revenue for us to keep investing in them and keep them to a high standard. Then they become an ever-decreasing circle of lower standard, lower income, lower investment, and that's when you eventually reach a full stop. But yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of the financial performance of the council, probably if you've done the budget workshops and looked, probably the area we're struggling on our income is leisure, in that it hasn't come back that quickly after COVID. So that is probably where, if you look at where we thought this year would be 2 or 3 years ago in terms of our income, it's probably the income from the leisure side, which is really restricting in what we can do elsewhere in the council and what we can spend.
May I have one more? Sorry,
Just
I
one,
don't mean to monopolise, but I do have one more. Just you talked about the relationship with Essex County Council, important one, absolutely. One thing that I have found particularly frustrating in terms of a recent decision by Essex County Council related to these, environmental goals that we, all share, is that their reluctance to go along a franchising route for the buses. I mean, I think our bus services are, they're not as cheap and reliable as we need them to be in order to get people out of cars and to reduce that environmental impact, reduce the congestion on our roads. And I think the franchising model would give us, it clearly would give us, or Essex County Council rather, a much higher degree of control than the model that they've decided to go with. So I'm just wondering what your view is on that, And if you are, from a Colchester perspective, putting any strong words to Essex County Council to try to persuade them to go in a different direction?
Yes, I mean, I take your point on bus services. I think we've had some good discussions in the past about bus services, and I think actually we ended up we listed all the things we thought were wrong with them. It's pretty much the same list, if I remember rightly. I don't claim to be an expert on decisions that Essex County Council take on bus services, because it's not something which I am involved in. You know, I'm not quite sure what their current arguments are around it. I will speak to them about it. Actually, I'm aware of what they're going on, although I'm not sure long term it's quite as final as you make out. But all I would say is I want to see better services in Colchester and in Essex. I think, well, I know that all the mood music I get from Essex County Council is they want to see better bus services in Essex as well. So I think from that point of view, we are very much on the same page. They are the Transport Authority. They are ultimately responsible for it. And I think to a certain extent, because they have the knowledge, I suppose I have to trust their judgment to a certain extent, that they've made their intents clear, that they want to improve them, and that they will set out to do it in the best way possible. But I will always question them and continue to do so.
Thank you, Morgan, and thank you, Paul. I've got a couple of questions to come back to. One of them, in terms of, we talked about visibility of cabinet members. I know Councillor Goss has asked a number of questions at cabinet and has asked them repeatedly now. He was promised answers, came again and was promised answers. He still hasn't had answers to those questions. So I think that's something more in terms of management of cabinet that I'd ask you to pick up on and give an answer to, please. Then secondly, in terms of comms, that comes within the portfolio, as I well know from previous experience. And you talked about engaging with residents. What are the plans going forward? As I know, we'd set in train some plans to communicate on capital projects and the town deal, but also you've talked about engaging with residents. What are your strategies for that? Those are my two main areas for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, we do plan to promote the capital projects. We might change some of the details a little bit, but I think we have, as a town, have got a good news story to tell there. And I think there is a lack of, perhaps, I don't think people are kind of aware of what's happening. It's going to happen in some places. I think we've missed a trick. And I have asked it to be put right in simply that we're not putting signs up on places. We've got the old bus station where the Grown Hub's going. Well, why haven't we put a sign up? Why isn't there hoarding saying this is what's going to happen here? And that is a point I've made, and I'm expecting that to be corrected soon. But yeah, there will be publicity probably in the run up to Christmas and in the new year around the capital projects. I will pick up very quickly on the questions. I thought they had been answered, because I know in some cases written answers have been prepared. So there's obviously been an issue with them getting through. So I wonder if perhaps somebody in Democratic Services could just pick up and just check that those answers have gone to Councillor Goss, because I do actually take that quite seriously. I think if somebody says you'll get a written answer, then they should get a written answer. So that is not good enough. And if I didn't get a written answer, I'd be annoyed. So I do understand that. Engagement, I won't go into the details of what we are planning on a couple of things to do a little bit more surveying and engagement, possibly around some of the capital projects coming up, to find out in a few areas what people really think about things and what people want. I think we're all aware that actually getting residents' views on things is quite difficult. You can fall into a trap of he who shouts the loudest, or she who shouts the loudest, or they who post the most on Facebook actually represent 90% of the views of a set of residents in an area. But sometimes they don't. So on a few things coming up, we are planning to actually do some well-managed, proper engagement. And I'm also trying to frankly encourage councillors to do it, to do it more, because if we can do a bit of it using our money and time, then that obviously saves the council some money. So yeah, I won't go into exactly what they're going to be because I think there's some commercial confidentiality around it, but hopefully you should see a few surveys coming out the next few months.
Thank you. And lastly, I don't want to dig up history here, but one thing that the public are quite interested in are developments around the town centre, previously known to us as the Alumno development. So without going over old history, what new engagement might the public be looking towards on that site under your leadership?
Well, I mentioned we might be engaging on some areas, and obviously I can't possibly comment on what they are. So I'm not going to comment on that particular one because there are complicated issues and discussions going on. But yeah, all I would say is I like listening to residents. So when and where we need to, we'll look to engage.
Okay, I think I'll be fair to you and not dive any further, but I'll have a think about it while I go to Councillor Willits next, please. Dennis.
Thank you, Chairman. At the moment, up in Scotland, there is COP running, which I think we should not miss the opportunity to question you on your green credentials, Leader. The lasting memory, or my lasting memory of COP so far, is the young teenager who parodied our politicians with climate change, blah, 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 save the planet, blah, blah, blah. And I think many of the residents of the borough must be siding with her view in that we don't have a particularly strong green affiliation at the moment. If I can give you a couple of examples, we have some horrific pollution areas, traffic pollution areas in the borough. We have the position where the last outgoing council or cabinet ordered 19 diesel-powered light trucks where everyone stood up in horror at the thought of not having electric. So given that there is a rather unseemly reputation for the borough's intervention on green issues, can I ask what is your overall strategy on green matters and environmental matters, and how are you ensuring that your portfolio holders are examining every possibility to ensure that we have a greener complexion and some of the horrors of the past are going to be expunged as soon as possible?
Well, I'll answer your last question first. I think I spoke about it earlier on this evening, that I'm actually asking all portfolio holders to report every month at the leadership meetings what they've found in their portfolios where they can improve on environmental matters. We, obviously the Borough Council, we only control what we control. Okay, so I can't, nobody within the Borough Council can necessarily control things we don't have control over, but we can our little bit of the world and our areas we are responsible for, we can. I know I'm sure when Councillor, I don't want to study Sunday, when Councillor Crowe comes along, he can probably talk for quite a long time about some of the plans being developed around electric refuse vehicles and our plans around new charging infrastructure going in. I know there's been pictures of him this week. I don't know if he was driving it, but I don't think he was, but sat stationary in an electric waste vehicle. I think he will probably enjoy talking about that at length. We are committed as part of our strategic plan and as part of my view of the direction of the council in all our areas to meet our zero carbon targets and improve anywhere we can in any way we can every year. We are sometimes constrained by what's actually available, or what's physically available in terms of technology. We are sometimes constrained by cost. We do not have limitless funds. But I constantly put pressure on all portfolio holders and all officers, to find any ways they can of improving our environmental performance. And I have to say, I think they're doing quite a good job within the constraints of the real world.
My second question, if you'll permit, Chairman. In many areas, we seem to be strong tactically, but there seems to be no overarching strategic plans to guide the details. We have the council's strategic plan, yes, but at times that does not seem to provide the high-level leadership which is needed. And if I could exemplify my point, earlier on you made comments about the problem of rural deprivation, and it's a very wide subject. Lack of broadband, lack of bus services, lack of transport, lack of access, the council closing car parks in the town centre so that people from the rural areas find it even more difficult to get in, and quite often it's too far to cycle. And we seem to have a whole series of tactics which we are pursuing, but there is no overall plan for how we're going to deal with rural deprivation. And I wonder whether that is the sort of area producing those overall plans, which perhaps should be in the leader's bailiwick, so that we all have a very clear helicopter view of how these issues should be tackled, and then we know how the tactics join together. But at the moment, I don't see this overall arching strategy. I mean, do you see that as part of your responsibilities to ensure that we have those high-level strategies?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I will just pick up one point on car parks. Actually, most of the time, with the exception of a few Saturdays, possibly in the run-up to Christmas, that there is quite ample car parking in Colchester. And even when there isn't, the park and ride is got lots of spaces. I know that doesn't really help people to the south of Colchester, but actually, most of the time there is car parking available in Colchester. So that perhaps shouldn't always be a problem. But I think the wider issue, yeah, I think that's a good point. That's a good point. And I think, firstly, where is the rural deprivation? And what is it? Is it the same as urban deprivation, or is it a different set of issues? It's probably a wider discussion than we can do tonight, but it perhaps needs a bit more analysis, really, to see what we as a council can do. Is it lack of employment? Do we need more employment opportunities in the rural areas? Should we be attracting or looking to attract more businesses into the rural areas? Are we doing enough there? Transport will always be a challenge in terms of public transport in rural areas, simply because it is very costly. And nobody has found a perfect solution on it yet that I'm aware of. But in terms of adding it into the strategy, or perhaps developing an actual rural strategy as part of our strategic plan for the council, I think that is something worth giving very serious consideration to. I think it's a point well made.
My final question, Chairman, again, is on the same theme of can we prepare high-level, or is it the leader's responsibility to prepare high-level strategic plans? A question which I've often asked and never really got an answer is, what is the purpose of the town centre? And the council, again, has many detailed plans for what the town centre should do, perhaps providing more housing, should it be pedestrianised and so on. But there is no, as I understand it, the council has no long-term overall strategy for where the town centre should be going. We all want it to be great and prosperous, vibrant and so on, but there is no plan to make that happen. Do you think this is an area which should be in your portfolio as leader?
Yes, I mean, actually, as I alluded to earlier, we are looking to actually develop a town centre master plan. I think we do need one, encompassing planning, transport, and actual use of our town centre, which is going to change. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think over the last 10 years, that if you like, the use of town centres has probably changed at a faster rate. Anybody can come up with plans for them, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years. If you'd have come up with a plan for Colchester Town Centre 3 years ago, it'd probably be redundant now, if we're honest. And if we come up with one now, it may well be redundant in 3 years' time. So there's almost a catch-up going on there. But yeah, I think we are working, and we have had discussions about getting an actual town centre master plan together, and perhaps defining in our own minds a little bit more what the purpose of the town centre is. What I would say, and this is a good thing, is, which I hope we can all be happy about, is the town centre is actually doing remarkably well at the moment. Post-COVID, it has recovered at a faster rate than I think anybody expected, and at a faster rate of a lot of our comparators. There are actually very few vacancies in terms of empty buildings in the town centre. I know we've got a couple of big ones, but if you actually go around the town centre, and you actually want to go and perhaps rent a shop or a property in the town centre, there's not actually much available at the moment, which is good. And it always seems to be busy. You come into the town centre at 9:30 in the morning now on a Monday, there's lots of people about. So all I will say is I firmly believe there is a bright future for our town centre.
Thank you. Dennis, you look just about satisfied there with that last answer. You are finished, yes? Okay, thank you. I did have just a message from Councillor Goss, who must have overheard what I said, and he said that the last cabinet meeting you had promised to get those answers, so hopefully that will happen. Apart from that, I think I've exhausted my questions and haven't seen any further indications. So it leaves me to say thank you, Paul, thank you, Leader, for coming here and answering our questions. There are still many to come, I'm sure.
I'm sure there will be, and thank you for your questions. It's been really enjoyable. I do enjoy coming to Scrutiny. I think I've been to every meeting so far this year, in one shape, form or another, Scrutiny meeting. And as a committee, I take very seriously, and I'm always happy to come along and answer whenever and wherever I can.
Thank you. Yes, I think we lost you once in a tent, but apart from that, we do encourage it, and that's one thing I would say. If you could encourage cabinet members to attend, not just when we ask them to attend in the particular instances, but to have them here is really important. To be on top of their brief is really important, and we've seen that previously, and we respect that going forward if that can be the case. Okay, all right, well, thank you all for the questions. Thank you, Paul. We can now let you leave, and we'll move on to the next item, which is the work programme. Bearing in mind it's 1928, we usually try and have a break. I hope we'll be able to deal with this item and then finish up, unless I see another dissent. No, I see nods. Okay, good. Owen, I'll move over to you. We had a discussion at the group spokespersons meeting about the work programme. If you could address the work programme and some of those discussions, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, just a second. I'm going to pick up on my notes if I can find them. Apologies for the delay there. I've got so many windows open on my laptop. Took a while to get through to them. Righto. So the notes that I have down from our chair and group leads briefing, we were going to look to remove the CBH KPI setting for the forthcoming year from January 2022. Firstly, Jeff Beals, as client officer, said that they wouldn't be able to be discussed at that point anyway. But we were going to look to Yes, in the long term, move that looking at CBH KPI setting into their annual review of KPI, annual review of CBH item, just to keep those together so that we can have a retrospective look back at CBH performance and then can discuss what, if any, views Scrutiny Panel has about setting KPIs for the company for the future year. In addition to that, Mr. Chairman, you discussed the potential for splitting the agenda items which were on for the meeting in March of next year, as currently we've got the One Colchester Partnership, the arts organisations, and 2 portfolio holder briefing and Q&A sessions on for that meeting, which I think everyone agreed was probably too heavy an agenda given the size of some of those items. So just wanted to bring that for a discussion for a panel to have a think about how you'd like to look at us changing how we look at those, and if there are any scheduling changes you'd like to make. But I'll leave that for you, Mr. Chairman, to lead the discussion on that one. For the One Colchester item that is currently on the agenda for March next year, Mr. Chairman, we talk about potentially looking at the wider health aspects of their work there, and specifically their work on COVID matters. That was all the notes that I had down, but I'll hand over to you to have a look at those that I've raised.
Thank you, Owen. There was only one other point that I'll come to. Otherwise, that's all of them. So I'll take them to begin with in order. With the Colchester Borough Homes key performance indicator targets not being ready for January, and that practical point mixed with the principal point, I do think we should take those when CBH come and report in a more holistic fashion, and we look into the detail then, and we can actually look at how we shape their future KPI targets at that point. Therefore, I suggest we do take that off the agenda, but we can link that into Councillor Ellis's briefing, portfolio holder briefing, because he has housing within his portfolio. The second point, I'm very clear, as was Councillor Willits when discussing at the meeting we had recently, that we do feel that the meeting on the 10th is too much, and therefore we would split that in 2. And we were quite clear on that. And we are likely to keep Councillor Crowe on the 15th of March and One Colchester Partnership, and to take Councillor Ellis and the arts organisations at a separate new date. What I also wanted to add in was when the arts organisations come, I think we have to be absolutely clear what the parameters are. And I'd like to try and set those here this evening, that it's not that we ask them to come and do long presentations about all the positives and lovely things that we know they do and contribute. I think we need to be a bit more focused. And bearing in mind, we have looked at their funding over the last few years, and this current administration have built on a sort of multi-year settlement deal. I think perhaps we can ask them to say what is their plan for that 4-year deal, and to begin that scrutiny of that, to look at objectives that we should be able to see over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So I suggest that is one way that we do it, and we set parameters, and spokespersons can help set those parameters going forward, but I think we need to be quite tight with it in order to actually get the best scrutiny out of it. So I welcome any thoughts on the logistics, which I'm quite clear we should split the meetings, but then secondly, the parameters with which to scrutinise the arts organisations. And lastly, One Colchester as well, that partnership as it comes forward, I think we have to be clear again with the parameters of what we're scrutinising there. And I actually believe, from my understanding and my interests, which I declare when we get there, in the CCG and the movements within health, we are seeing a much closer working. We've seen £1 million being put through this borough council on health and inequality matters. So I believe there's good reason to start scrutinise some of that, but also we're looking at a future contract, the NICS contract, which is community services in a sense. and the Borough Council being a partner in that, I think, again, that's something we could scrutinise within the One Colchester Partnership brief, as well as, I think, lessons learnt from COVID and the partnership working of that group. I welcome any thoughts or any dissent or any disagreement with what I've just outlined there. I see Councillor Bourne indicate, so I'll go to you first, Tina.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think that for the arts funded groups, it could be quite tricky for us to scrutinise if we don't know what the service level agreement is, because we might be scrutinising something that actually they haven't been funded for. So it might be useful to have an overview of the service level agreement. We all know what the arts organisations do, but I'm not quite sure what we fund them for and if it is specific. So I think that could be quite unfair to do that. Having had sight of that, once we've had sight of that, I know older agreements used to say something about inequality, equal access. So I'd be particularly interested, if that's still in the service level agreements for all, about how participation has been increased within those vulnerable groups, whether that's through disabilities or through language, cultural aspects, or through hardship funding. So that would be good. And the data that is used to support that. And also for the One Colchester group, the widening inequality across the borough, how that group is hoping to improve health outcomes for those who experience the widest differential.
Thank you. That sounds very useful, and your point, especially on the arts organisations, is a really good one. Let's get that service level agreement in front of us first, if we could get that and share that with all members. But again, through the group spokespersons meeting, we can use that to frame our scrutiny. That would be useful. I do take your points, Tina, that it could be unfair to scrutinise them harshly on one thing that perhaps we haven't supported them with, which is not something the council has enabled. But I do feel the funding enables a lot of their work to happen, but I do absolutely get your point. Are there any other thoughts to put into this process?
No, I'm happy to support that, Chairman. I think that's great, isn't it? If we've got 4 years of those arts organisations, we do need to know what they've been challenged to do and make sure they begin to think about it.
And I think if we found the service level agreement was just continuing on, but now they've got a 4-year agreement, I suppose there's questions there as to, okay, is there anything new that with more consistent funding, which we all appreciate is a good way forward, what else could they do? Or can they focus more on? Okay. I see no other indications, so I assume that we're in general consensus on that. And Owen, it's over to you to help us find another date to split that March meeting and the service level agreement for the arts organisations. And I suppose similarly with the One Colchester and health organisations, I'll work with you, and Pam Donnelly's the right person to go to with that, to ensure we've got something in front of us to set those parameters as well. Okay. We're asked to consider and note and approve the contents of the work programme. So can we all approve that, please? I see nods and agreement. Thank you. Excellent. Therefore, that is the end of all of our business. And I thank you for this evening. A bit earlier. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your evening. Cheers.